Hello, my name is Hitendra Patel. I'm the Managing Director of the Global Innovation Management Institute. I'd like to welcome you and join our vision and our mission of the Institute. Our vision is to democratize innovation everywhere. In organizations like universities or corporations, in high schools, in governments. And the idea is to unleash that creativity across the globe. Our mission is much more simpler: to train 1 million people worldwide, certify them, and unleash their creativity and their problem-solving skills to target any problem on this planet. The Global Innovation Management Institute has got certifications for individuals, for corporations, as well as for the government. And the whole idea over here is through certifications, people have the right to practice innovation. Through certifications, we create a roadmap for how to get better and improve as we get level 1 certificate to level 2 to level 3. We are today working with the Dubai government, the Qatar government, across Colombia, in Brazil, in the United States, helping these institutes and these countries become better in terms of their innovation journeys. We're working with corporations, giving them roadmaps, how they can go from level 1 to level 2. And we're giving certificates to individuals as they go from level 1, 2, 3, and 4 in terms of how they can actually innovate themselves, how they can innovate in teams, and how they can innovate in a company.
We've worked with several innovation consultancies, and we found the GIMI methodology to be able to help us democratize innovation very quickly across large groups of people.
Curriculum isn't enough anymore. We need to really be finding ways to expand the school into the community and bring the communities into the school. And design thinking and the GIMI impact model is what's going to help do that. I think that we really need to start looking for authentic, experiential learning opportunities for our students. And this is a really great framework that teachers can use that makes it easy to do.
The value that we see being part of the GIMI program is that we can offer capability building for students, for professionals, for corporations, and that's really exciting to be able to create a language that can help everybody connect with what strategic innovation is.
Today we've got 25 countries who are partners of the Global Innovation Management Institute. We'd like to see all 195 plus countries becoming part of this institute. So we are looking for training partners across the globe. We're looking for university partners in every one of those countries so they can be part of our network. And we would like to see companies and corporations around the world all embracing the certification programs of GIMI. And as a result, we can target any problem and we can solve any problem. Join us on our mission through certificates to give people the right to practice and a roadmap of how to improve.
Great, thank you very much. So this is GIMI for some of you who are new today. Just to do the intro, as you know, every Wednesday at 9 a.m. EST time, basically we run the GIMI Think Tank, which is a virtual forum. And the aim of it is to create a fluid, agile community of innovators around the world. As you see, usually there are innovation leaders from industry, government, and academia from 6 continents who join, depending on the time, because for some it's very late, for some it's very early. You will see people maybe joining a little bit even later as well. So the aim of this community is also to create awareness around innovation and innovation management systems, to share valuable and cutting-edge knowledge from distinguished speakers among the community around different trends, state innovation of a country, innovation management tools, innovative solutions, basically, who are explored in some place around the world. And as you know, every last week of the month, we basically occupy or allocate this space to an important trend that we believe in. We have a futuristic center about this that my colleague Carolina is spearheading, which is green hydrogen energy transition. And we are inviting speakers around that sort of topic. I'll leave it to Carolina to share a little bit more about what we are doing on that and to introduce the speaker for this week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Erila, and thank you everyone for joining this session. So as Erila mentioned, this is part of our energy transition network that we're pushing. And the main objective for this network is to pretty much socialize and share what's really happening in the world around energy transition. What are the trends? Where are we going in the different industries with the different technologies around this specific, let's say, trend that most of the countries are right now entering. And I try to understand how to really tackle this huge challenge that we have on energy transition as humans. So I'm very glad to have today Andrew Kodis. So let me just share my screen and give a very brief introduction about Andrew. So Andrew is an innovation and a strategic leader. He has been, he has held like different titles around his career. He was the Vice President of Business Development and Strategic Marketing for Olia Edge Analytics. This is an Industry 4.0 automation for water utilities. He was also the CEO at Black Diamond Structures. This is a carbon nanotechnologies for batteries. He was also Managing Director for the Venture Capital team at Savic and Innovation Director for General Electric as well. So tons of experience. He has been taking more than 30 years of experience where he has leveraged creativity, learning, service and new opportunities also to be able to support different organizations from companies, governments, institutions around the globe to solve complex problems around business growth. So he brings an extensive expertise to the table in energy, sustainability, technologies, business development, sales, marketing, and of course, he has this expertise as well on chemical manufacturing, wastewater, computer and electronics, and oil and gas extraction, among others. So he holds a Bachelor in Science and Mechanical Engineering and a Master of an MBA of Master of Business Administration from Texas A&M University. So thank you very much, Andrew, for being here. And I leave you the floor now for you to introduce us this amazing topic that we have in terms of the nexus of water in this energy transition trend that we are all facing. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I greatly appreciate the introduction. Let me share my screen here. All righty. Well, first off, let me just a second here. Sorry. There we go. Why is this not letting me? Well, we just tried this out and let's try this here. Let me know if you can see the screen.
No, now we,
Yeah, you can see it?
yeah.
Yes, we can.
All righty. And I'm not sure why. Fortunately, I can't see my notes, so just a second here. Okay, here we go. Now I should have it.
Perfect. We can see it now, Andrew.
Alrighty, good deal. Alrighty, thank you, and I apologize. First off, thank you, Carolina, for the great introduction. And thank you for the opportunity to just share a little bit of a perspective on what I consider changes in the water energy nexus that we're seeing as we incorporate the energy transition and new technologies into energy. I've been blessed to have served the water and energy industry for a large part of my career over the past 35 years, and been fortunate to be able to view that through a global perspective, working in a variety of different countries and technologies. So I'd love to share that with you. I think looking back over presentations that were previously done for this group, certainly saw a big focus on energy and the energy technologies. And so in this discussion, I wanted to slant this a little bit more towards the water side and insights that I see in water today that may have an impact on energy transition, and also things to think about, and maybe a few initiatives and technologies that we're seeing that I think are really, really exciting out in there. So I hope you enjoy this, and please look forward to the questions afterwards. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about, why is the energy water nexus changing? What are we seeing? And then a little bit about what's this relationship between energy, water, and you could probably add food and agriculture in there as well, but I wanted to keep this relatively narrow. Certainly we're seeing a rise in water scarcity, challenges across the globe, and I'll provide a few examples of those and the impact they're having on the communities that are experiencing those. Always, with water, wastewater is a huge concern as we talk about the interaction between energy and water. And then some initiatives and innovations that I see that I think are pretty exciting, and some things to think about at the end here. The water energy nexus, the relationship between water and energy are changing, and that's driven primarily because of the energy transition, the need for carbon neutral or carbon free or carbon reducing technologies to produce the power that we need to live every day, and by an increasing water scarcity issue that is really surrounding the globe in a pretty big and deep way. Certainly we can talk about that a large portion, almost a third of the population, doesn't have access to clean, reliable water supplies on a daily basis. And so the water that we use for energy, industrial processes, all takes away from that in certain regions, and is a big concern for obviously the residents and the communities in those areas. Water is a very regional issue, and it's a regional issue because the supplies for water are confined to aquifers that are geographically defined, and from the standpoint that water quality differs in every region, depending on whether you're pulling groundwater or surface water or seawater. All of those waters have different elements, salts, and contaminants present in them. And that impacts how hard it is or how easy it is to condition those waters for their use, whether that be potable water or for industrial. Certainly seeing obviously a change in energy sources, but I think it presents this opportunity to innovate, especially around these relationships between energy and water. And I think there's a lot of great innovation that's happening out in the industry right now that I'm looking forward to sharing with you. I love this diagram. It's a Sankey diagram. I pulled the country out of it. The country isn't really that important. What I think is more important are the relationships between energy, water, waste heat. Historically, there's been a very strong relationship between water and energy. Obviously, when we look at natural gas, coal-fired, utility-fired, even biomass, nuclear, there's a huge amount of water that is consumed in those processes, really for cooling purposes. And so we see it evaporated, and then some concentrated wastewater that comes off the side of that. I love the fact, and we'll talk and pull out a few of these relationships a little bit farther in the discussion. But again, I think I'll highlight both the inputs and the outputs and the interactions, I think, are very important and are going to change in a significant way as water scarcity increases and as the energy transition occurs. Talked a little bit about the impact of water scarcity across the globe and trends that I see related to water scarcity. Mexico City. Mexico City is just months away from running out of water. They experience upwards of about 30 centimeters annually of subsidence, ground settling, due to the fact that they have depleted the aquifers underneath the city in such an extreme way. I think it's also relevant to note that the water that they're bringing in, they lose almost 40% of that due to aged infrastructure. And that's not an uncommon situation across the globe, where the water infrastructure is difficult to maintain. It's typically underground. It's typically buried beneath other assets, buildings, facilities, and those pipes leak. And we'll talk about some more examples of that as we go through the discussion. Cape Town, I think, was a very famous lesson a couple of years ago, where they were just months away from running out of water as well. The Mekong River in Asia, we look at that starting in Tibet, flowing through China, and then flowing through a variety of countries. Each country treating that water as their own, placing dams and pulling from that water supply for their individual needs on a country level. But certainly as that gets down to the end of the river, it's at a historical low now from a level perspective, and there's real concern about that river not flowing anymore. We look at India's fast running out of water, but I think another interesting thing that really ties this all back to the energy water nexus in a very direct way is the increase in mining, and specifically lithium mining. And this is an example in America, but there's also a great example down in Argentina where while there is lots of brackish water that is very heavy in lithium salts, there's not a lot of fresh water, and there's real concern as these mining operations grow to satisfy the lithium requirements for the energy storage of the energy transition. There's real concern about contaminating this and how that's going to impact the communities in those areas. So certainly we see that water scarcity increasing across the globe, and I think that's a trend purely, for the most part, driven by our growth in population, concentration in cities and mega cities, all of which are driving the depletion of aquifers, combined with climate change and providing some variability in surface water as well. So something to think about, I think, as we look at the energy transition. Of course, the one that has me most concerned personally is the water crisis threatening Guinness. Obviously in beer, but if you look at the manufacturer of Guinness, they're experiencing water shortages that threaten their ability to produce their products in a pretty big and deep way. I've visited, there's multiple places where bottled water is produced. There's a county in Georgia where over 60% of the water that the city consumes is put into bottled water through a bottled water facility. So again, as water scarcity, as aquifers deplete, as water sources become more utilized due to population growth, scarcity is a trend that will continue. Wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about what we see as far as the energy transition and the impact it will have. So certainly we see a reduction, certainly a hoped for reduction in petroleum, natural gas, and coal mining. We expect to use less of those. But we are seeing an upshot in mining of other materials that we need for green technologies. Probably the most, the most common one or the most famous one is lithium that we talked about before, but nickel and a wide variety of other resources are also going to be critical. What is interesting for me and what I'd like to share with the group is this is increasing water and wastewater demand and production in new locations. And as the world has grown more crowded, the trick in all of this, I think, is what is the impact in those regions and into the communities that surround those regions, and are they willing to accept that impact? And I certainly know in the US and in many other parts of the country or in the world, this concept of not my backyard has a large geopolitical impact on accessing that, accessing these resources, as well as a variety of other concerns, not the least of which is human rights concerns associated with mining. And so when we talk about the water and energy nexus, how does this increase in water and wastewater in a specific region that is resource rich impact that region? And I think that's something that we need to consider, and certainly an increasing trend in those discussions over the future here. Just about every water process can be modeled actually very simply. And I wanted to just kind of ground everybody in this simple process in case maybe you're not as familiar with water and water treatment, water processes, but we pull water from the ground, aquifers, we pull water from rivers and lakes, and we pull water from the ocean. And that water has stuff in it. It has dissolved solids, it has suspended solids, it has organics, and it tends to be very diverse, meaning that the groundwater in one location can be very, very different than the groundwater in another location. And even the surface water in one location can be very, very different from the surface water in another location. And that surface water can be even seasonally variable, where when rain pushes solids into the water, you can see the water turn from a nice blue to a nice black or brown, really with a ton of materials. And so all of that has to be, if we want to use that water, we have to clean it up. And we do that by adding some chemicals, and we add some energy to that water. And out of that process, we get cleaner water with less stuff in it, and we get wastewater, which has more stuff in it. Now, wastewater has an environmental impact on a number of different levels, not the least of which is the impact on oxygen levels in an environment. So many of the, and I say that because there's a lot of discussion about using seawater and seawater desalination, but when we do desalination, there is wastewater associated with it. It gets pushed off into the ocean. It can have an impact of consuming oxygen in the water, and that presents a challenge because it can create dead zones in the ocean, which kill off the sea life. The sea life now begins to deteriorate. It consumes more oxygen and increases the size of that dead zone. And certainly we've seen that in a number of areas across the globe. And then, of course, with the cleaner water, we do use that for a variety, not the least of which is potable water. And I think it's always interesting to state that water is the one thing that we as human beings can't live without. We need to drink water on a daily basis to be able to survive, and we don't do very well if we don't have that water on an ongoing basis. Kind of going back to the energy transition and what we see with water, I think certainly we're wanting to see that decrease in natural gas cooling and coal cooling and petroleum cooling. And that is the objective of really driving down carbon impact of these traditional energy sources through a number of different technologies. But one of those technologies that I think is being explored and is the focus of this group is really the green and blue-gray hydrogen production that we believe will have a real impact on the energy transition. And certainly that is great. But I think it's interesting to note that the manufacture of green hydrogen and blue-gray hydrogen, it consumes about the same order of magnitude of water. It may be a bit less, it may be a bit higher, but in general, it's on the same order of magnitude that we use today for cooling natural gas, cooling coal, cooling petroleum in the production of energy. So I think that's something to keep in mind as we look. I think there's the opportunity and a lot of discussion that I've seen around where do we produce green and blue-gray hydrogen. I think blue-gray hydrogen tends to be more kind of an industrial process, but there's certainly a discussion around the distribution of green hydrogen to closer to the location, which means the consumption of water is going to be more dispersed into communities that may have ample supplies of water, but on the other side may not have ample supplies of water. In addition, the production of green hydrogen requires that water to be demineralized, which means all of the contaminants removed out of that water. And traditionally, that process requires or produces wastewater. And so that wastewater needs to be managed and taken care of in a responsible way. And again, that's some of the challenges of kind of distributing out manufacture across a region versus more of what I would say is a traditionalized energy production strategy where we are centralizing energy production. I really, in my experience over the years, water and wastewater go hand in hand, and really comes back to that fundamental process that I talked about before. Usually a strong relationship, not only with the wastewater from a pollutant perspective, but also from a heat perspective, because changing, as we discharge that wastewater, it has the ability to change the temperature of the surrounding waters. In some cases, that can be quite significant. That change in temperature can drive different processes in the water, growth of algae and biologics that will really kind of provide some challenges, consume oxygen, again, which is very challenging for aquatic life. And all of that, I think, is something that needs to be thought about. I for the longest time, and this goes back 35 years, some of my earliest times in water treatment, both at utility scale and in industrial facilities. And a very common phrase was, the solution to pollution is dilution. And I think that's been followed by, making sure, or a strategy has been making sure that as wastewater is discharged into a larger body of water, that there is enough water there to dilute it so that the toxicity becomes manageable and less impactful. The challenge with that is that we are seeing our rivers and our lakes and our surface water bodies become lower, right? If we look at the Mekong River Delta, that water is almost at a standstill. And so the idea that as we discharge wastewater into these regions and that we're going to get dilution, I think is no longer a valid assumption and will become increasingly challenging as we see more and more water consumed, again, through population growth and a variety of different activities that are happening that just as we as society and the world move forward. and certainly we've talked about the salty wastewater and the impacts it can have even in oceans and so forth. One of the real interesting things, I think, from my perspective around water is it is a basic human need, and it really has been undervalued or highly subsidized across the globe. People need water, and I think there's real reasons and necessity for that. But it had also created a situation where water and the impacts of water are not widely measured. And so a lot of what I have seen over the past 10 years, 12 years, is an increasing focus on data measurement, certainly with an eye on conservation. I use the California Water Data Consortium. California is a huge state, fifth largest economy in the world, consumes a tremendous amount of water, is depleting aquifers at a staggering state, resulting in subsidence in the Central Valley of California, in pretty significant ways. The recent legislation in California has asked utilities and industry to begin to produce reports and plans for the use of water and the consumption of water and the conservation of water over the next 5 to 10 years. What I find interesting is that this past about 2 years ago, those reports from a variety of utilities were submitted into the state of California, and by and large, they were all rejected. And the reason they were rejected was they didn't have the data to support their assumptions. And that's become a real problem in planning, in that there just isn't available data. And I think this is not a unique situation to California. I see this across many countries where water is just something that we assume is there and not a lot of focus. I think the infrastructure challenges that we see with water is also an interesting trend in the future as well. So the California Water Data Consortium was formed to try and help California to bring together those data sources. They're doing great work, and I also think the measurement side of this, it's really interesting. There are a lot of landowners who don't necessarily want to measure. Pajaro Valley is an agricultural area right on the coast of California that started measuring well water 40 years ago. And the reason they did that is because they were pulling so much water for agriculture out of the aquifer there. What they were finding was a tremendous amount of saltwater intrusion, and that was impacting their production and their ability to grow. On the power side, there's a lot of energy around harnessing tidal power. Cook Inlet has a tidal surge of about 25 feet or about 8 to 9 meters. Significant potential there for energy and energy production in that region. When I look at new technologies that we're seeing out there, desalination or reverse osmosis is a great technology that requires a lot of energy to pump the water to the right pressure for that process to work. And so subsea desalination, I think, is really interesting, because now we're placing that reverse osmosis technology down at the bottom of water, bottom of the ocean. We're using the water pressure just due to the depth of water to drive the process and pulling fresh water off. And I'm really interested to see. I picked Waterrise, but there's probably 6 to 8 companies out there that are exploring this technology right now on a startup basis. Salt power, I think, is interesting. This again is producing water directly from osmotic energy, and I'm looking forward to see how that produces, and is it able to produce power at salt contents that we typically see either in the ocean or through the production of various processes. Catalysis has been, I think, at the forefront of most of the chemical processes that we see, including the production of hydrogen. Most of the time we have to drive that catalysis or those processes with heat or pressure. And in this case, what we're seeing is with CIGI is the ability to enhance the efficiency of that catalysis process using light. And I think that's very, very exciting. They've done some demonstrations with hydrogen as well as a number of other chemical processes. If those processes become more efficient, then they really provide some significant opportunity for energy conservation, I think, in a big and deep way. And so, I guess in closing, and I think I'm getting close to my time here, really appreciate it. So energy, water, and food relationships are changing in a big and deep way. We're seeing that there are a number of trends from population growth to water scarcity to the transition to low carbon energy sources. And as those change, they're going to have impacts on, I think, more regional communities versus kind of a national or global perspective. And I think that's going to drive the need for innovative solutions. Obviously, water supplies are becoming increasingly stressed. And we don't want to see or forget the fact of wastewater and the impact that wastewater has on the world around us, especially in the context that surface water and the things that we maybe use to dilute wastewater are no longer going to be viable solutions for us. And so we're going to need to treat that wastewater and manage that wastewater in new and different ways. I didn't talk a lot about infrastructure, but water infrastructure is old and getting older by the day. It's an issue, especially in countries that have old infrastructure, old buildings, that have deep history. All of that infrastructure is below ground, below assets that can't be moved, and it becomes very, very challenging. I know I was amazed a couple of years ago to see wood pipes are still used in a top 5 city metropolitan area. So this is a city that has, is extremely large and still has these old wood-based pipes providing water to the community. And certainly I think that contributes to some of the challenges that we see around water loss. In the case of Mexico, that's 40%. In the case of the United States, it's trillions of gallons a year. Water loss is a significant thing, and certainly the focus of the water industry in a big and deep way right now. Green energy may consume less, and certainly we hope it consumes less, but it does still consume water and wastewater, maybe not in the production of energy, but in certainly the production or manufacture of the devices that produce energy. And that less may not be enough, especially as we get into the water-stressed areas. And I think we're going to see a trend of innovative solutions and creative solutions to help guide us through these challenges and some of these trends that we see. And so with that, I'll open it up for questions, and I thank you for your attention and the opportunity to share this with you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Very insightful presentation, and to see this nexus between water and then energy transition, of course, raises a couple of questions. So let me just ask one from the crowd, and then I'll give the floor to Hitendra, who also has a couple of questions and comments around this. But Andrew, so this energy produced from water is considered as a sustainable source of energy, right, around the globe. So do you see some, let's say, either trends or some policies that are trying to change this positioning of sustainable energy that is produced from water due to this increasing global scarcity of water resources around the globe?
It's interesting. 15 years ago, I attended a and I'll talk about sea power or tidal power. I attended a conference, and it was the conference to attend in this area, but it was very small, maybe 25 to 30 booths, fairly limited in its scope. As we look, we're beginning to see larger, and I'm seeing larger and larger initiatives around sea power, tidal power, very interesting technology around using tidal power and reverse osmosis in combination, which I think are very well or very interesting as well. So I am seeing an increasing trend there, but I think it's obviously going to be regional solutions. If you're in the center of a country and not near tidal, then you may not see that opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Andrew,
Go ahead.
Andrew, fantastic presentation. Puts our arms around a real important issue, water, foundation of all life, and all our industries depend on them to a large extent also. And so all our cities depend on it. So it's a really important thing. I was going to make a comment. I used to drive from Iowa to Colorado to go skiing when I was in college. And they had the Olala, I think there's a underground waterway called the Omalala waterway.
Yep.
It's what it was. Yeah. And this waterway was an underground water table, and all of Kansas and all the other states were pumping out of it. And the pumping water out of the underground water, never believing that the water would run out. And they would pump like crazy until suddenly Kansas and all these farms begin to become very productive farms in terms of getting green agriculture coming out of it. But they were tapping into water, and that water is running out quickly too. And then what we saw fascinating across this journey was the desalination plants that are coming in Libya and all the desert countries in Dubai and all the areas where there was lots of sun, lots of wind, but they weren't using that. They were using oil and gas to use the energy to make reverse osmosis. So maybe the first question I have is, clearly there has to be something about the use of the water and the location of the use of that water into the geography, whether it's sunlight, whether it's wave or winds. Which are the locations in the world which are perfectly positioned for the new innovations for new water production using energy that is also green because they are ideally located near sunlight or ideally located near waves or something else? If you would like point out 3-4 places where you think will be the centers of innovation, because they have to do it, because there's a need for the water, but there's also an abundance of new types of energy to produce that. Where would you say 3-4 locations where if you wanted to relocate, go there? This is where the future is.
Yeah, I think, it's an interesting question. I think the one that comes front of mind, obviously, are coastal regions, right? The opportunity to use seawater and the variety with tidal change, to use tidal power, to use depth of water to produce clean water. And we have far, far more seawater than we can ever consume. That's the one thing right now we're not going to run out of is seawater. The next areas that I think are very, very interesting, and of all places, is an example is El Paso, Texas, right? So El Paso, Texas has about 30 times more brackish water, salty water, than it does fresh water in its aquifers. And so the ability, and obviously a lot of sun, a fair amount of wind in Texas, and so there's the opportunity to pull that brackish water and draw upon that brackish water to produce clean water. If we go overseas, obviously, Saudi Arabia produces a huge, almost all of their water through either distillation or through reverse osmosis, and a lot of sun and a lot of wind in Saudi Arabia, and so a lot of opportunity to transition those to that purification of water to less energy intensive type processes. I think, though, the challenge, having spent a fair amount of time at KAUST and looking at alternative energy in desert environments, I think they're still trying to sort out how do you keep the solar panels clean and can keep them efficient, And in the case of wind, how do you keep the wind blades and the erosion on the wind blades due to sand and dust storms down to make sure that they're effective? Those are the three places. I'm sure there are lots more that we could talk about. But I think those all provide the opportunity to combine pulling water and alternative energy to produce clean water for folks. Africa is another place that I think we're seeing a tremendous amount of innovation going on right now, because large parts of Africa don't have the infrastructure. And so you're seeing a lot of development of small distributed systems, and a lot of creativity in utilizing water resources in that region.
Got it. Let me go to the other extreme now, saying, look, if I could really be creative, really imagine the future. They got rice growing in salty marshlands now. Rice, they've got the genetically engineered plants to be able to take salt water somehow and produce rice. Now, it's a matter of time. Is anybody working on plants that can create balloons of water? Just re-engineer the plants to produce the water to come out purified or cleaner. So they actually are biologically doing reverse osmosis, biologically are doing whatever was supposed to happen that we are doing in industrial processes. But now we actually say, hey, plants, you guys figure it out by playing with the DNA and other things. You see that as a complete leapfrog generation, because we can certainly grow rice in salt water. So why can't we do the same thing with regular water?
That's a really fascinating question, because so I grew up down in the Central California area, and redwood trees. Redwood trees put out 1,000, 2,000 gallons of water a day. Just through their kind of natural growth. I haven't seen a lot of information or background. I'm actually going to spend some time looking at it because it's a fascinating question. What I do see more of, I do see a lot of focus on hydroponics. I have neighbors here in Texas. We live in Austin, Texas, and it's hot. And people are growing their own vegetables, leafy greens, using hydroponics. So I see that. I see the potential for large hydroponic facilities, especially near centers. You're seeing startups who are focusing on those business models. So I see opportunities there as well. The other one that I think is really interesting is water out of air. All right. So there's a number of startups and technologies out that just pull water straight out of air. And again, the question I think with those, along with many of these processes, are they just something for very small communities, or are they scalable to a more larger population center, and can they have real impact? And so those are, for many of these technologies, I think the question that's asked.
Yeah. Andrew, maybe we're going to probably get close to finishing this time up with the question. Another question I have is, as we look at water, we can become more efficient in how we use it. So we reduce the amount of water we're using. And I'll go back to farming. We spray the whole farmland with water, and there's only water needs to go to the specific seed only. And we are already learning about precision agriculture, where they know exactly where the seed is planted. We can put exactly where the seed is, the fertilizer and the water. So we just drip exactly where the seeds are by putting XY coordinates on that. In the same way, do you see, we know this usage in farms about precision agriculture, decreased water usage. Are you seeing precision usage of water in maybe buildings, in schools, where you train people to somehow only use what you need to use? It turn off exactly right. It's recycled, reused in a way that it becomes closed and circular economies within smaller ecosystems. Because we normally think of the big.
Yeah, that's another fact. I didn't touch on conservation, but I think in energy and in water, some of the simplest things that we can do to help work on these challenges is to conserve. Certainly, if you look at green building codes and green buildings and LEED certified buildings, those are measured on using water very, very efficiently. you're starting to see in some large metropolitan areas wastewater treatment happening within the building envelope so that you don't pass down all of the waste load to the centralized waste treatment facilities. So I think there's you're looking at more water efficient faucets and showers and toilets, and all of those things I think have a big impact on the water and energy balance, and all in a good way. I think that's a talk in and of itself, because there's a tremendous amount of activity, I think, in that area.
Andrew, just like carbon credits came to the market because we were producing too much carbon into the atmosphere, and carbon credits was traded now. So if you were producing carbon, you could buy off some credits to trade against that. Do you see water credits coming also in the future?
You know, here's the challenge that I see with that. And for me, I tend to look at it very simply. We as human beings don't need energy, right? We to survive, we don't need electricity. We don't need, as much energy as we probably consume in a big and deep way. But every single one of us needs to be able to drink water, right? And so I think the big challenge is, how do you manage this resource that is so critical to human life in a way that is equitable and is fair and does not preclude people from having water? And that's the impact of, if we had credits, what does that do to individuals who maybe are less fortunate or don't have the ability to pay for those credits from that perspective? I think it's an interesting idea, but I personally am just concerned about the impact of on the alternate there. I think we're all going to have to pay a little bit more for water, right? I think we tremendously undervalue water in a big and deep way, and I think we're all going to end up paying a little bit more for water as time goes on.
Andrew, you make me reflect a little bit. There was a TV show when I was a kid growing up called The Big Blue Marble. I don't know if you remember The Big Blue Marble. And the Big Blue Marble was the planet Earth, of course. We are blue because we got water on it. And I believe I heard one of the recent physicists talk about this thing. I don't know why we are trying to go to Mars and go to other planets when we are on one of the best ever planets possible. Yeah. And to try and make anything look like our planet at Mars will be almost impossible. Yeah. Right? The abundance of water, the abundance of carbon, oxygen, the abundance of everything else. And so maybe what's your key message for all of us saying, hey, look, we got a fantastic planet here. What the hell why do you want to leave the planet? Why don't you fix it? Why don't we make it better? What are your key messages from science, technology, social, environmental, big messages for the key takeaways? I want to give you the last 2 minutes to kind of summarize some of the things that we talked about and tell people, guys, do something about this thing. Let's fix it. Let's work on it. But there's a huge business opportunity.
It's interesting. Well, first off, as a classic dreamer and a bit of a creative, the concept of going to Mars and going where no one has been before is just fundamentally interesting to me. But I think the other fundamentally interesting thing is there's so much of the ocean we haven't explored as well, right? There's places in this world that we have not explored. It is a unique place, and it is somewhat a fragile ecosystem. And so I think that the end result is we have to think through, and the biggest challenge I think we have is we tend to latch on to a specific type of technology or a specific solution and begin to believe that that's a solution for a large part of the ecosystem and a large part of our planet. And so, and in reality, those large solutions can have a negative effect in many small communities, the people that live day to day, and there's that policy, I think, needs to be flexible enough, and the thinking needs to be flexible enough that we consider the regional issues as much as we consider the national policy issues from my perspective. But listen, I started out as a scout, and one of the things that was really interesting for me is leave no trace. And I'd love to see the world get to the point where, well, we can have lots of discussions. Our goal is to leave no trace, right? To leave places better than we found them before. And I think if we all adopted a mindset of leave no trace and to leave things better than before, I think we would be in a better spot.
Andrew, lots of wisdom in what you said and what you shared. It's a scarce resource. It's not a scarce, it's an abundant resource which we are making scarce. Right?
Water everywhere, but not a drop to drink.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Right. So it certainly is. It should, and it affects every one of us. So everybody who's listening over here, think about how you can help drive this thing forward. I do believe that we can use the energy of the sun, solar or wind, tidal or whatever, through the sun again, to be able to produce whatever water we need. I think we can. And we need to find ways to drive technology down to reduce the cost. We have to drive the technology down to reduce the cost as much as we can so that it's now accessible to all. Otherwise, the cost will define who it's accessible to, right? So you got to do that for sure. And in here, I think there are lots of technological innovations which are waiting to happen, are about to happen also, whether it was reverse osmosis or whether it was just grabbing water from the air, or maybe working with biology and saying somehow, how do you get the biology create, synthesize water, right, somehow. And so it can be done. And so it's just a matter of imagination. And, for all of us, Andrew, in our think tank, if you imagine the impossible, a few of us can make it possible. And that's what you have inspired us with today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Andrew, fantastic presentation. Appreciate your time. And and one last thing. The name of that underground waterway, Maria typed it in for me, was Ogallala. Maria
Ogallala,
Thompson.
yeah.
Ogallala Waterway. And I was amazed. For anybody who gets a chance to drive across Colorado into Kansas, you'll drive across this waterway, and 1 second the river's on the left-hand side. You will not cross the bridge. It'll cross over to the left-hand side. It's a waterway which goes under the table. There's a water table going up and down. It's crazy. It's fascinating. But that water table is going down so fast now that the richness of Kansas is under jeopardy, because you cannot continue pumping water out of the ground and hope it will be there tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, Carol.